Hey guys, it's Sadie. Welcome back to the Hear Me Out podcast. This week's episode, I am already laughing at the fact that this lore exists. I'm going to be talking about my experience with the Naval Academy. And I have been waiting to record this episode because I was waiting to go home for spring break where I could acquire my journal I had during that time, because the fact that I have firsthand evidence, what's it called, like a primary source for this to really just put you in the moment and back up what I'm saying is kind of crazy. I knew that it would just add a layer to this episode that I wanted to give. So I collected it and today I opened it. And it's funny because it's really easy to find where it is in the journal because I notoriously write with blue pen. So it's the only place in my journal with black pen. And so it sticks out like a sore thumb if the experience in and of itself wasn't already pretty harsh and memorable. I will not forget the date. It was certainly June 11th, 2022. Okay, so to preface this entire experience, I was going into my senior year of high school. So I had applied the end of my junior year for what is called Summer Seminar. And a lot of the military academies have it. So you have like Army, aka West Point, you have Navy, the Naval Academy, Air Force, etc., etc. And they all have a kind of summer seminar, which is basically used to determine interest of prospective students. It's also just to give prospective students an understanding of what life is like, what just the next 4 years could be like if you were to attend a military academy. And at this point in my life, if you think of the fig tree metaphor, you know what I mean? If you have read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, that has like a notorious metaphor for the fig tree, like branching out a bunch of different directions, basically to be like, you don't know what you're doing with your life and or there's so many paths for you to possibly take. It's so hard to choose one. Well, I was very much in this state. I mean, it's kind of hard not to be when you're 16 years old. And one of those paths was to go to the military academy. My parents both thought that it was a fitting choice for me. I wasn't 100% sure. I wasn't jumping at the idea, but I also was quite intrigued by it. I wasn't turning it down. And I applied to the summer seminar at the end of my junior year, and it's like its own Common App, basically. And it's very competitive to get into. And I applied and I heard back about 2-3 weeks later, I would say. And I had gotten waitlisted. And I was like, okay, great. Honestly, I'm not too butthurt about it. That's a sign, and I'm taking it. It's a sign that this is not for me. If I can't even get into the preliminary rounds of this, if I can't even get into like the unofficial session or whatever, why would I apply to the actual school? Because for those of you who don't know, look it up. The application process of this, it's not your typical Common App. You need to get like letters of recommendation from legislators and like government officials and things like that, besides the fact of like the physical end of it and its physical testing, all that stuff. We'll get into that a little bit later. But in my head, I was like, okay, well, I should just quit while I'm ahead if I'm not 100% sure about the idea and I'm already not getting into the summer program. And then I must have been quite high on that wait list because I heard the next day, I got an email being like, haha, like you were accepted to this program. And for a second, I actually considered not telling my parents. And I ended up telling them and was not expecting them to make me follow through with said program like they did. And I was like, no, guys, like it's really fun. And they were like, no, like this is a great opportunity. You should really just do it. Like it's super prestigious. Just go and then just feel it out and then have your experience, have that be like your final say, how you're feeling about it to determine whether or not you go. And I was like, okay. Cool, fine. So I accept the invitation and it was like, you report to Annapolis, Maryland on June 11th at whatever it was, like 12 p.m. we'll say. It was like, I don't know, pretty early in the afternoon. And since I applied towards the end of the school year and I heard back relatively quickly, like this was all really coming to fruition very fast. I remember being like, oh my gosh, well, I was waitlisted a day ago. Now I was off the wait list, and then in 2 weeks I have to go to Annapolis, Maryland, and that didn't feel like enough time to mentally prepare. But honestly, you could never prepare for what was about to happen to me. I did not grow up with the kind of experiences that kids in this program had. I didn't even realize those experiences were a thing. So I drive down from Pennsylvania to Maryland with my dad, and I remember we were going around the town a bit. We ate at this restaurant. I'm not sure the name of it, but I can visualize it perfectly because it was seriously my last supper. The entire time we were joking, haha, this is the last supper and good luck. And I remember everything that I ate down to a T because everything that just followed this, like this was the marker right before the changing point. And then so I have this meal and we're just kind of buying time. And then finally it's my time to check in. And I have this massive like Nike duffel bag over my shoulder. I put my hair up into a braid and I was like, okay, I'm wearing my athletic fit. I'm ready for what's about to be thrown at me. That was a generous thought, Sadie. So we walk up to this barricade and I just walk right through it, honestly. Duffel bag on shoulder, I'm ready. And I walk into the building and then I hear my dad over my shoulder being like, Sadie. And I turn around and they stopped him at the barricade. Immediately, absolutely not. And so I come running back and I was like, hey, like, what's wrong? And the midshipman that was stopping him, which midshipman is just a word for the students at the Naval Academy, just for context. The midshipman that had stopped him was like, you're at this alone. Like, this is the furthest that he's allowed to go. I hadn't even given them my name yet. What the heck? I'm 16. I'm looking at these jacked kids who just went through their plebe year, it's called, which is like your first year at school. And they look like they're 25. They have already gone through hell and back, it seems. And I'm just like a squirmy little kid, not really knowing what I'm in for. And I'm already feeling resentment for being thrown into this. But then also the other part of me is like, okay, well, maybe this is a future. This could be cool. Kind of rad. So I walk in and the first thing that someone says to me is, the first and last thing out of your mouth from here on out is going to be ma'am or sir. Do you understand me? And I was like, holy fuck. And I caught myself because even though she just told me the first thing out of my mouth from here on out is ma'am or sir, it just was unnatural to me. And she said, do you understand me? And I almost said yes. Well, actually I did say yes. I was like, yes. I mean, ma'am, yes, ma'am. She was like, good. Follow this route and pick up all of your uniform. And so they hand you a laundry bag and you're in this massive, beautiful room. Can't even describe it. And yet you're getting handed these clothes that are going to get dingy real fast with this dinky little laundry bag. And so you get your assigned clothes. It's like 6 shirts, 1 for each day, but then they only give you 2 pants, which is kind of disgusting because it's June heat and you're not allowed to do your laundry there while you're there. So just really think about that. And then once you get your uniform, you get your name tag and your assignment for your company. And it was like, oh, okay, your Echo company. And the girl looks at me and was like, oh my God, you're a meatball. And I was like, oh my God, did she just call me fat? Like, why is she looking at me so happily and basically calling me fat? I did not understand. Basically, the nickname for my company was the Meatballs. And just so you know, that was the best company. Hate to rub it in everyone's face, but we just had the best leaders, the best slogan, the best clapbacks, just everything. Proud to be part of Echo Meatball Company. But at that point, I didn't understand the lingo. I was just, what is going on? So I'm just kind of like, oh, okay. I keep moving. Meatball, whatever that means. And I'm standing now outside with an entire group of kids. And we're all just looking at each other. We're all seemingly equally scared. Like, what did we get ourselves into? With the exception of maybe 1 or 2 kids. And they knew exactly what they signed up for. And then we were waiting for enough kids to then be able to move to the next step. And so next step comes along. We're taken through the barracks, basically. And it's like the dorm. And as we're getting taken through the dorm, they're yelling, explaining basically the rules of engagement and what's about to go down. And giving you your room assignments, all this stuff. The real stuff hasn't happened yet. And actually, everyone was being very nice. it was harsh speaking and definitely jarring, but for the most part, everyone was actually nice. But I didn't really know it at the time until I get into my room assignment, and in there, both my roommates were already there. One was from California, one was from Puerto Rico. And it's also important to keep in mind that the amount of like cultures and just countries that are contributing to a melting pot is insane. Like, I was meeting people from Germany. People were flying in all around the world from different like territories, countries, whatever. And this was one of my first experiences of that. And so I meet my roommates and I'm like, hey, what's up, guys? They're kind of like giving me the 411. If I remember correctly, one of them's sibling was already in the Navy. One of them's mom graduated from the Naval Academy forever ago. And they have set foot here before, it seems like. They know their surroundings. I am actually chicken with a head cut off, shitting my pants. I really should have looked up like a map of this place even. I should have watched videos. I don't know what I was doing, but I didn't do my research because I think it might have had the opposite effect also of just scaring me more. It was almost better to just go in blind. But I think this is then a good time to read my first journal entry. June 11th, 2022, 3:08 p.m. Saturday. What the fuck? I am writing sitting at a desk in my dorm at the Naval Academy, and I'm only thinking of how much I screwed myself over with this. I'm beyond excited, but I'm simultaneously shitting my pants. I don't know what I expected, but my dad just dropped me off, actually wouldn't allow otherwise, and I hopped right into a stern quote, "From now on, the first and last words that come out of your mouth are sir or ma'am. Understood?" End quote. 6 damn days, but I'm just focused on making it to my next meal. Also, I quickly learned that I should have brought more than just this journal for downtime, although I have a feeling this next hour is the last of it I'll have for 6 days. Hazing exists here, but so do nice people. There are 2 different brands of midshipmen: those who pity us but have patience and empathy while being stern. Then there are elitists. Granted, they earn their titles, but some leeway in the first 30 minutes is non-existent. Got a talking to for smiling by 2 massive midshipman guys. Oh yeah, elitists delight in our shaking hands and quiet voices. But I thought the concept of shut the fuck up and work hard was accepted. Apparently not. Being loud is the only thing that will save me, apparently. I'll check in at lights out. XOXO, Sadie. So then we have an orientation for that day. I forget the specifics of day 1, but I do remember you were meeting your company and then you were meeting your squad. So basically, I believe there were 5 companies. I forget the name for the overall troop basically, but then it's split into 5 companies, which is about 115 kids each. And then within your company, you have your squad, which was 6 to 7 kids. So my squad had 6 kids and it was me and then the rest were boys. And that was pretty average. I mean, keep in mind, it's a very male-dominated field. And so the numbers reflect exactly how you would expect, even in this program. Okay, so the first night we had an orientation, and that talked a lot about the application process in and of itself. And we did have, I'm like 99% sure, a physical activity that night. I'm not too sure what it was. That part's a bit hazy. But what I do remember is meeting my squad and also just learning all the plebe rules. So your first year at the military academy is called your plebe year, which is just hell. And everyone says if you can get through your plebe year, you can get through anything. But then plebe summer is what they call like the assimilation period, quote unquote, from civilian to military life. And that's 6 weeks when you don't have a phone. You get 2 calls throughout the entire 6 weeks, which is a whole event in and of itself and very organized. And you're in the middle of a field when they like let you call. And if your family's not on the phone and like not waiting, or you can't get a hold of them, then it sucks to suck. I heard stories of people like going through absolute hell for 3.5 weeks and calling their parents, and their parents like couldn't get a hold of them. So this program was assimilating 6 days, basically the first of the 6 weeks. And although it wasn't exactly that. Obviously, the actual thing is very intense. This is pretty close to it. There were certain rules of engagement that were different than the rules of engagement for actual plebe summer. But even then, our midshipmen told us, like our squad leaders, told us that they had not accidentally, they broke, point blank period, the rules of engagement. Okay, so the first night, as I'm saying this, I'm kind of jogging my memory in and of itself. But first night, we definitely had a physical activity. I forget what it was, but that was like meeting your squad, learning the rules of engagement, learning what you were and weren't allowed to do, and you weren't allowed to do a lot. And part of these rules, for example, was you're not allowed to roll your shorts. You're not allowed to step on gray tiles in the hallway. Everywhere you walk, it has to be a high knee jog. And if your knees aren't high enough, you get in trouble for it. Every single corner that you turn, including stairwells. And their stairwells were, they weren't like rectangular, like they didn't only have like 1 or 2 points. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's basically like half of a hexagon. So then you would have like 3 different points just in between each flight of stair that counted as a corner. And every single time you had to say, "Go Navy, go," or "Beat Army." And you had to yell it, which is called sounding off. And so we're learning all these rules of engagement, and man, oh man, were they enforced. That's the whole point, is basically no mercy. My squad leader's name, I won't give a full name, but his first name, which we weren't allowed to know until the very, very end, but I just think that if I was to give his first or last name, the first is more fitting and funny for the story, because on the last day, he was like, "Okay, I'll tell you, you have to guess first, blah, blah, blah." Long story short, his name is Payne. Couldn't think of anything more fucking fitting. That's all he inflicted on us all week, except he is one of those people that is so influential, maybe not influential, but certainly memorable to your life, that no matter what you do, like, you will not forget their presence and the conversations you had. He was an amazing mentor. And even though obviously you're not giving like phone numbers and connecting on LinkedIn after this or whatever, like maybe if I went to the academy, I could have tracked him down, but that's not the case. But 6 days that I spent with him and like under his watch was actually insane, how much I just learned about like leadership, especially leading by example from him and having your squad's back. Kind of a digression, but he was the first figurehead of many that really just deepened my appreciation for the military. Going into this, I had like family members that were in the military and otherwise family members just in service generally. And so I always had appreciation for the field. But until you are subjected to these rules and going through interrogation techniques and putting what feels like your life on the line, even though it's only a simulation, until you go through even the slightest bit of that, I just feel like I didn't even have the capacity for appreciating that group of people as much as I did. Like, I feel like you see military movies or you have like ex-military even go on podcasts and all this stuff, and they just talk about how important it is that you're all in it, that you are like willing to literally die for one another and for your country and stuff like that. And just like the bonds that are forged through training, through simulations and service and stuff like that. And this might sound dramatic to some people, but really just getting the smallest minuscule taste of that really just snapped me into it. And I was just, by the end of those 6 days, I really felt bonded with those people. I mean, literally a trauma bond, but what you gonna do? I still like follow them on Instagram. I'm in like group chats with them to this day. Obviously, they're not particularly active, but every once in a while we'll be like, "Oh, haha, like remember when?" And we definitely keep tabs on each other, and I know like where they're at in their lives. And this program was literally 3 years ago. And those are definitely some people I'm not going to forget for a really long time for one reason or another. But so anyway, back to the first night, where like I remember actually being on the line. So your heels are up to like the gray tiles and your hands are to your side and you're staring straight ahead. So even when these people are in your face and like screaming at you and spitting in your face and stuff like that, like you can't really make eye contact and you just have to look ahead. Even if they're like all around you, it doesn't matter at what angle, you have to keep a bearing, which is basically a serious face. And so he was getting in our face and like reading off our names and our name tags, whatever. And he said my last name was Morgan, as if it was with a G. And he was like, "Is that right?" And I was like, "Sir, yes, sir." And then I immediately regretted not being truthful, because then 5 seconds later I was like, "Sir, that's not true, sir." And he was like, "Well, what is it then?" And I was like, "Morden with a D, sir. Why didn't you say that beforehand?" And I was like, "Sir, I was nervous, sir." And he was like, "Morden, if you learn anything from this process, it's that you got to get it right even when you're nervous." And I just remember that so vividly. He was like, the key is to get it right even when you're nervous. And I could say nothing to that, but sir, yes, sir. And so then shortly after, it was pretty late at night at this point, but we were all still lined up and going through it. And the midshipmen start riling up. Because keep in mind, these people are 19, maybe 20 years old. So at the end of the day, even though they are being trained for the military and they are pretty scary, they're also like teenage boys and teenage women, literally just fucking around and finding out. And they love a bit more than anything. The switch that they flipped on and off was insane, especially when you were always on the bad end of it. But then the second they would turn to their friend and be like, "Oh, this is so funny." So then all the midshipmen are sounding off and they're like, "All right, bearing competition." And in walks in this kid who was in the program, but he was massive. I would estimate he was about 6'2", pretty round in the stomach, very like broad shouldered, just massive. And he was just so physically intimidating. And for some reason, my squad was to supply someone that was to face this kid in a bearing competition. And so Payne looks at us and was like, "Squad, nominate someone for this bearing competition." Again, bearing is basically just keeping a straight face. And I think I don't know if I cracked and that was it. Something made Payne look into my eyes and be like, Morden seems like she's got it. And everyone just didn't want it to be them. And so naturally they all nodded and threw me under the bus. I was like, "Fuck you guys." And so then he was like, "All right, Morden, you're up." And he pushes me into like the center of the company. And so remember, now I'm not in my squad. I'm alone in the company, which is about 115 kids. 115 kids are around us watching. And then with that means probably like 40 midshipmen and maybe like a lieutenant or two. Like there were some high ranking people moving in and out of these companies like throughout the nights. And you never really knew, except they did make you know, which we will also get to in a minute. But so I'm in the middle of this company and they were like, "All right, first one to break. Let's go." And so I have to crane my neck up at this dude because he's so tall and you have to look each other in the eyes and you're practically toe to toe also. And your hands are at your sides and you're just looking at each other. And I'm biting my tongue. I was biting my tongue so hard, I thought my teeth were going to go through it. But that was my only hope in winning this thing. And so after 30 seconds, the midshipmen start encroaching, quite literally. And there are about 6 of them around us. And they are trying their hardest to crack jokes and to make us laugh, whatever it takes to make us break. They're in your ears, they are in your face, they're in between both your faces, they're yelling at you, they're whispering to you, they're doing whatever. And I'm just staring at this kid for my dear life, repeating to myself. I remember being like, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you," just trying to keep a serious face. All these tactics were working, and you can't clench your fists, so I wasn't doing that, but it was really hard. Long story short, about 5 minutes into this, we held it for a really long time, but 5 minutes into it, the big guy cracked. And when I tell you, that was one of the proudest moments I had had up to that point in my life, it was insane. everyone starts cheering, jumping, 115 kids clapping, jeering, whatever. And I remember I just turned to Payne, and Payne was like, Morden, you made your squad proud. Get back in line. And I was like, no fucking way. Like, first bearing competition. Like, of course I was the one to be called out for all of that. But good thing my ass was not over the fire after that. It was bad for that big guy who returned to his squad. Still thinking about you to this day, dude. My bad. Also that night we were given sheets, and the sheets were basically information that we had to memorize, and it was like names of like codes of the levels of ranking. We had to memorize like badges and what the certain badges meant if they were on the sleeve of someone's arm, whatever. But really, the first night was the only night we had any downtime. And it was crazy because we knew that we would have to know this information. Like, they weren't just giving this for fun. This wasn't suggested reading. This was, no, you better know it. And so the one side was all those rankings and stuff, but the other side was songs. And the songs, I would estimate there were about maybe like 10 or 12 of them. And you had to know all the songs, and you figured you were going to get tested on them, but in what context, like, you didn't know. And just constantly felt like you were waiting for the shoe to drop because you were so tired throughout the days. You were falling asleep while standing up. And so when you got back to your room at like 10 p.m. or something, you didn't want to sit up with your flashlight because, again, then you also have lights out, which is a whole nother thing. And so they come in your room, they make sure you're sleeping, like you don't have your phone on and stuff like that. So you don't really want to be like caught up with your flashlight, but then when are you supposed to learn all of this information otherwise? And so, yeah, we were just given this paper on the first night, and they were like, all right, it's in your best interest to figure that out real fucking quick. But above anything on that list, we were told to learn the navy blue and gold. That is their alma mater. And he was like, you have to learn that by tomorrow afternoon. Do not embarrass me. He was like, do anything you can. Look that up on YouTube. There's got to be renditions of it. Get the melody right. Show up here tomorrow with it. And so we had sounded off for that night. Sounding off in the company just looks like everyone counting and make sure you're counting for. And you have to sound off and scream your number at the top of your lungs. And it was still so weird, like being shy with it. And then once you're all accounted for, whatever, you have to run up to bed, and they're chasing you. They chase you to bed, to your door, and actually through it. They don't really care. And they run you into your room. Like, the amount of times like you just couldn't even brush your teeth, crazy, gross. I get it. It wasn't my best hygiene moment, but when you're just trying to make it to your next meal, that's when you can come to me. So they chase you to your bed, and I was on the top bunk. Actually, we didn't have a bottom bunk. Like, it's not like someone could have lucked out with that. And so it was me and my 2 girl roommates, and we were all in different squads, and you have to hop up. And so you have to like situate your chair in order to be able, while they're chasing you, to just quickly have something to like propel yourself off of, to like throw yourself into the bed, because they don't have ladders, if that wasn't obvious from all of this effort that I'm giving. And so they run after you, and they're screaming. It was like a Halloween haunted house. Like, that's the closest thing I can equate it to. Like, those kind of witch labs are following you throughout the halls. And you sleep in your gear. You're basically in the same clothes for 6 days because you don't have time to change. Because then the next morning, they wake you up by coming into your room, banging on the door, taking your sheets off, like blasting music through the hallways, whatever. All I remember was Pepa's playing in the hallway. I have such a vivid memory of being on top of the bunk and hearing the first notes of Pepa's, being like, what is going on? This is just a fever dream. And yet at the same time, not having enough time to think about it, and just being like, I jumped off of the bed, and you have to have your pack prepared. They like give you a pack that you have to have on you at all times, whatever. Think of it as a survival kit. So you have to have your pack prepared. So then basically all you need to do in the morning is slip on your shoes and go out. You do not brush your hair. You do not brush your teeth. You barely have time to put deodorant on because they time you to when you run down to the block or whatever it was called. I remember running down and being ready with one of my squad mates, and he was like, well, where the fuck's the rest of your squad? And I was like, sir, I don't know, sir. He was like, well, go find them. And so we had to like find their room. We were running, and then we get them. We were like, come on, like whatever. And we like get the guys down. And he was like, well, that was pathetic. And he was like, it's in your best interest to get here in less than 1 minute the next time I see you, but you're only as strong as your weakest link. So do not come again alone. Like, do not come without your squad mates, whatever. Come all together. So that was another lesson learned. And this is probably a good point for journal entry number 2, June 12th, 2022, 10:04 a.m. Sunday. On personal time at the moment, Midshipman Baez just talked to my roommates and I and gave us some insight into plebe year, as well as some good advice. Your brain doesn't remember pain. So even if you feel like you're going to drop dead, stick it out. Your brain won't recall this pain in 20 minutes. I have the CFA test today, but I'm just going to try my hardest and use it as a reference point when I go home and train. I'm going to use this advice from the former during my test and get through the 30-ish minutes. Maybe I'll call the rents, as in my parents. I learned the navy blue and gold verse 1 alma mater. Got the worst sleep of my life last night, so hoping for better today. Disadvantage of a jarring awakening. At least I won't be in crippling anticipation. I don't really know what that means. Already envisioning crying in my dad's arms the second we're off base. But until then, I'm holding it together well and making short-term goals to make it to breakfast, then lunch, then dinner, then bed, then repeat. Def should have brought a book and AirPods. Oh God, someone getting tested in the hallway to back up their statement about push-ups. I need to memorize some more chain of command names. Check in later if I have time. XOXO. So the CFA test was day 2. And if you don't know, the CFA test is basically the physical barometer that they judge you on to get into the academy. I don't think barometer was the correct word there, but moving on. So you have to do like pull-ups, the mile, push-ups, all that good stuff. There were also a lot of vivid memories from that day. I can't get into too much detail. Otherwise, like, this is going to be easily over an hour. I'm already going to have to edit this down, I know. I was so embarrassed when I couldn't do a pull-up going from, like, dead arm hang all the way up back to dead arm hang and then again, because my hands were so fucking sweaty that I couldn't even hold the bar. Just day after day was just such a meme. So basically the day-to-day looks like wake up call anywhere from 4 to 5 a.m. but you didn't know when it was and you weren't allowed to like set an alarm. They would hear it in the hallway because there's someone constantly on lookout basically. Even if you put it like under your pillow, I don't know, it's just kind of weird because you do need to sleep with your door open and they can come in at any time if they really wanted to. I don't remember having anyone after lights out coming in the middle of the night, but still, like just the amount of anxiety though, like I wouldn't sleep because I didn't know when they were coming. And so the constant, just like, it wasn't the same exact time every day, but you just wanted to be prepared. It was just like a real thing. Because again, then you have like 1 minute to get downstairs. And so the average was wake up between 4 and 5 a.m. You go and you do what they call PEP. And so PEP, you're out in the morning. It's like pitch black and you're working out. That can look like a lot of different things. I remember one of the most memorable days of PEP, we ran at like 4:45 to the turf fields, and it was so beautiful. It was the biggest contrast, like the whole thing was just feeling like a joke because Annapolis is so beautiful and their turf fields that we were at, they were right on the water. And so I remember we were being led by a Navy SEAL actually through this workout. This was either day 2 or 3. And we were being led by a Navy SEAL doing insane amount of physical activity. And the whole time I'm just like sweating, dying, doing more in the first like 3 hours of one day than I would in an entire week back home. And I remember looking over at the water and the sun was rising up. And since it's the Navy, obviously, like, you're going to see boats. They had these beautiful sailboats, and it was just such a visual. And so I would be holding a plank, And honestly, I'm pretty good at forearm planks, but you needed to do like forearm extension, kind of like push-up position. And so I would be dying like 5 minutes into a plank, arms shaking from muscle fatigue. And I would just look up and try to focus on that beautiful view until then someone's in your face again screaming. So it's kind of hard to focus. But so yeah, pep would look like anything from, I don't know, running a few miles to doing a Navy SEAL workout to doing whatever. And then you would come back and you would stretch. Actually, note on that Navy SEAL workout, one of the things was you had to do a 10-minute plank and every minute on the minute do a push-up. And if you've never tried that, be my fucking guest. Holy shit. I was good, like I said, at forearm planks, but that's just a different muscle. That small distinction between forearm and full length, I was like shaking at minute 2 probably. And mind you, I was like on varsity crew at this point. I had been an athlete my entire life and I was fit in very specific ways, maybe not like a well-rounded fit, but man, the specific ways I was being tested on here at the Naval Academy was not it. So my arms are shaking at like minute 2. And then I think I ended up dropping at like minute 4 onto my face, but then I got back up super fast. And then again, pain is in my face being like, Morgan, get up, like Morgan, get up. One of the reasons why I will still remember my squad mates years later was from that morning. I have never felt so supported in my life. It was just that feeling was incredible and just so beyond myself because I was struggling so hard. And I remember my teammates who could barely breathe themselves and they were struggling also, and one or two of them were also dropping, but we were giving it our all. And through every like spare breath they had, they were like, you got it, Morden, like you got it, Morden. And so I think in the 10 minutes I dropped twice, but I literally dropped hard on my face and I got right back up and I was curling like my fists in the turf, just anything to stay up. And the motivation to keep going and to only drop 2 times when I certainly could have dropped like 15 was them. I just remember them being like, come on, Morden, like you got it. Like we're here with you. We're here with you. I really feel like the theme throughout this entire story time basically is that even when the details go hazy, because I didn't have a lot of time to journal, I didn't give all of the details, and for things that you think that you're going to remember forever, no matter how traumatic they are, sometimes you just don't. But no matter when the details are hazy, I will forever remember how this retreat made me feel. Retreat, please, as if it's like a peaceful experience. How this program made me feel and how the people at different moments made me feel. And all of that was basically just like strong and supportive and indestructible. That was pretty much how I felt at the end of this. Then yeah, after pep, you would run back, you would do your stretching, you would have like 15 minutes before breakfast. So then that's kind of when you could, apply deodorant and brush your teeth. And then you would go down to breakfast and then you would barely eat though, because then you had to do a workout right after breakfast. And then 2 or 3 of the days, I want to say 2, had classes. So then you would do like workout, class, lunch, class. I remember I took a English class, and then you would then meet up for dinner, and then after dinner you would do a variety of things. One of the nights it was like drill practice. Drill, if you're not familiar with, is, for lack of a better explanation, basically like marching, and there's a lot more to it and specific techniques and different calls and blah blah blah, and it is quite impressive. I don't mean to downplay it, but yeah, you would do like a drill practice one night, or you would have competitions other nights, and then you would work all the way up to about 10 p.m. and then they would chase you back to your room, classic, after singing the Navy Gold and Blue and doing your sound offs and stuff. And then you would go back, and then that's kind of when you could shower. But then it was gross because then you would shower and then just get back in your dirty clothes, because those were the same clothes you had to wear the next day. You would feel clean for all of 2 minutes, and then you would just sleep in sweaty clothes. Okay, journal entry number 3, which is the last journal entry, I believe. So I went off the grid for 2 days. The last one I read was June 12th. This is June 15th, 2022, Wednesday. Oh my goodness, I wrote this in military time. That's when you know. The other days I wrote, what was it, like 10:04 a.m., which I guess is technically still military time without the AM. But here I wrote 17:22. June 15th, 2022, Wednesday, 17:22. Good night. Okay, so it says, holy shit, flaming hot shit in a dumpster fire, actually. I'm 5 days into this Navy camp, and it is possibly the hardest thing I have ever done. Sorry for the abrupt ending, guys. I try not to go past 45 minutes on the episode, so I wanted to make this a 2-part series. Tune in next week to hear why I was so animated in that journal entry, and we're going to talk about prank wars, sea trials, and what is called NDOC. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, I really appreciate it. Last thing I'll say, per usual, is just to keep up with any extra content on the Instagram at HBU Hear Me Out. Hope you enjoyed, and beat Army. Bye, guys.